Ladies and gentlemen, night owls and seekers of the shadows, welcome. You've tuned into a place where the veil between our world and what lies beyond is at its thinnest. We're talking about the night shift, that liminal space between dusk and dawn when the world sleeps and a different kind of life stirs. For most, it's a time of rest. But for the security guards, the hospital orderlies, the factory workers, the lone custodians, it's a time of profound isolation. An emptiness that doesn't just allow for imagination to run wild, but one that seems to invite things in. These are not campfire stories. These are accounts whispered by those who have stared into the static of a security monitor at 3 a.m. and seen something stare back. These are 4 terrifying, real night shift horror stories. Listen closely. The silence between my words is where you'll hear them. Story 1. The Patient in Ward C. My name is Leo, and for 3 long years, I was an orderly at St. Ignatius Memorial, a sprawling, century-old hospital on the outskirts of a sleepy town. The day shift was a blur of controlled chaos, beeping machines, visiting families, the relentless pace of medicine. But the night shift was a different beast. The lights were dimmed, the halls fell into a hushed reverence, and the only sound was the distant hum of ventilation and the soft, rhythmic breathing of the sick. That I was assigned to the East Wing, which housed long-term care and the palliative unit. Most of my rounds were routine, checking 4 drips, helping a patient to the bathroom, ensuring everyone was comfortable. But Ward C was always different. It was the oldest part of the wing, scheduled for renovations that never seemed to come. The floorboards creaked with a voice of their own, and the air was perpetually cold, a damp chill that seeped right into your bones. The story among the night staff was old hat. Ward C, specifically room 307, was sensitive. The room had been sealed for years, ever since a terminal patient named Mr. Albright passed away alone in the dead of night. The official cause was cardiac arrest, but the rumors said the nurses found him with a look of such absolute terror on his face that his mouth was frozen in a silent scream. They said he had clawed at his own neck, drawing blood. The room was never used again. One particularly quiet Tuesday. Around 2:17 a.m., my pager buzzed. It was a call button. From room 307. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. It had to be a malfunction. The wiring in that wing was ancient. I radioed in. Control, this is Leo. I'm showing a call from 307. That's a sealed room, right? A crackle of static. Then the voice of Sheila, the night supervisor. That's affirmative, Leo. Must be a glitch. Added to the maintenance log for the morning. I was about to acknowledge and move on when I saw it. On the patient monitor screen at the nurse's station, the one that showed the vitals for the entire wing, a single line was active. Room 307. It was displaying a steady, normal heart rate. 72 beats per minute. I stared, my coffee turning to acid in my stomach. There were no sensors in that room. The equipment had been removed decades ago. Sheila, I said, my voice barely a whisper into the radio. The monitor, it's showing a rhythm for 307. Silence. Then, say again, Leo. The cardiac monitor. It's active. 4307. Stay put. Sheila's voice was sharp, professional, but I heard the undercurrent of fear. I'm coming to you. As I waited, my eyes glued to that steady, blinking line, a new sound cut through the silence. A soft, rhythmic tapping. It was coming from down the hall, from the direction of Ward C. I picked up a heavy flashlight, more for comfort than utility, and walked slowly towards the sound. Talp, talp, talp. It was metallic, precise. As I neared the door to 307, I realized what it was. It was the sound of a fingernail tapping against the metal call button beside the bed. The small, wire-reinforced window on the door was dark. I leaned in, peering through the gloom. The room was empty, just as it should have been. The bed was stripped, a bare mattress visible. But the tapping continued. Talp, talp, talp. And then it stopped. In the profound silence that followed, a voice, dry as dust and impossibly close, whispered from the other side of the door, right next to my ear. I'm ready for my medication now. I stumbled back, my heart hammering against my ribs. Just then, Sheila rounded the corner, her face pale. Leo, what is it? I couldn't speak. I just pointed a trembling finger at the door. The monitor at the station behind us suddenly flatlined, emitting a long, piercing tone that shattered the hospital's quiet. We both spun around. The screen for 307 showed a single, flat green line. And then, the call light above the door to 307 blinked once and went dark that we never spoke of it again. It became one of those unspoken rules of the night shift. But a week later, I was making my rounds and passed a young, new nurse coming out of a room in Ward C. She looked shaken. Everything all right? I asked. She forced a smile. Yeah, just a long night. I could have sworn I just saw an old man in a faded hospital gown standing at the end of the hall. But when I looked again, he was gone. She shuddered. Weirdest thing, he was just tapping his finger on the wall. I didn't tell her what I knew. I just nodded and continued my rounds, making a very wide berth around room 307. Some shifts, you just keep your head down and pray for the sunrise. Story 2. The Thing in the Static. My name is Sarah, and my descent into hell was a job as an overnight security guard at the Blackwood Mill. It was a massive, derelict textile factory that had been shut down in the 80s. The owners hired a security firm to prevent vandalism and copper theft. The pay was good, too good, which should have been my first red flag. The job was simple, 12 hours alone, from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. I had a patrol route that took me through the vast, echoing, weaving rooms, past silent, skeletal looms that looked like the fossils of giant insects. My only companion was the handheld radio that connected me to a central dispatcher miles away and the bank of 16 CCTV monitors in the security office. The first few nights were uneventful, eerie but manageable. The sounds of the old building settling were unnerving, pipes clanging, distant creaks, but I chalked it up to age. The problem was the cameras. They were old, and the feeds were grainy, often flickering with static. Camera 12, pointed at the basement access door, was the worst. It was almost always snowed over with fuzz. On my fourth night, during my 2 a.m. rounds, my radio crackled to life. It was David, the dispatcher. Sarah, you got movement on camera 7, the main weaving floor. Check it out. I looked at the monitor bank. On screen 7, a shadow flitted between two looms. It was fast, man-shaped, but wrong. It seemed to stutter, like a corrupted video file. My blood ran cold. I gripped my radio. David, I see it. I'm the only one here. I repeat, I am alone. Copy that. David's voice was tense. Stay in the office. Lock the door. I'm alerting police. I locked the office door and stared at the monitors. The figure was gone from camera 7. But now, camera 9, showing the hallway outside the office, flickered. For a split second, I saw it, a tall, thin silhouette, its head cocked at an impossible angle, standing right outside. Then the screen dissolved into static. Panic seized me. The radio hissed. Sarah. It was David, but his voice was stretched, distorted. The signal. It's breaking up. He's in the wires. The static from the radio grew louder, filling the small office. I watched in horror as the static on the monitors began to change. It wasn't random snow anymore. It started to coalesce, to form patterns. On camera 12, the one that always showed the basement, the static swirled and resolved into the shape of a face. It was gaunt, with dark, empty pits for eyes and a mouth stretched wide in a silent scream. It was looking right at me. Then, one by one, every single monitor began to broadcast the same face, emerging from the fuzz. 16 identical, screaming visages surrounded me. The temperature in the room plummeted. The radio screeched, and a voice, composed entirely of digital noise and malice, whispered from the speaker. I see. You. The office door handle began to jiggle violently. I backed into a corner, fumbling for my flashlight, my only weapon. The banging on the door wasn't the sound of someone trying to break in. It was a rapid, unnatural series of taps, like 1,000 insects hitting the wood at once that I don't know how long it lasted. It felt like an eternity. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying for it to stop. Suddenly, the banging ceased. The static from the radio and monitors vanished, replaced by a dead silence. Cautiously, I opened my eyes. The monitors showed normal, empty feeds. The radio crackled cleanly. Sara, Gomain, police are 2 minutes out. Are you okay? It was David, his voice clear and frantic. I sobbed with relief. David, something was here. In the static. Static? He replied, confused. Sarah, your feed was crystal clear the whole time. We saw you on camera, just sitting at the desk. Then you suddenly dove into the corner. We didn't see anything else. The police found nothing, of course. No signs of break-in, no footprints. They wrote it off as a panic attack, cabin fever. I quit the next day. But sometimes when the TV fuzzes out between channels, or my phone drops a call into a hiss of static, I see it again, that face forming in the noise, and I hear that digitized whisper. It's not confined to the mill. It's in the signal, and it's always watching. Story 3. The third shift at the all-night diner. This is Maya. I worked the graveyard shift at a 24-hour roadside diner called the Crossroads Grill. It was the kind of place that existed in a bubble of fluorescent light, an island in a sea of darkness, serving coffee to truckers, insomniacs, and people running from things they didn't talk about. I loved it. I loved the solitude, the quiet hum of the refrigerators, the way the world outside the windows was just a black void. The regulars were a cast of characters. There was Ben, the weary long-haul trucker. There was Mrs. Gable, an elderly widow who came in at 3 a.m. every night to eat pie and read romance novels. And then there was the man in the corner booth. We called him the Traveler. He started showing up about a month into my shift. He'd always come in alone around 1 a.m. and sit in the same cracked red vinyl booth at the very back. He was tall and gaunt, dressed in an old-fashioned, slightly too large suit that looked like it belonged in a different century. His skin was pale, almost waxy, and he never made eye contact. He'd order a black coffee and just sit there, stirring it slowly, the spoon never making a sound against the mug. He'd stay until exactly 4 a.m., leave a single, tarnished silver dollar on the table, and walk out into the night without a word that he gave me the creeps, but he was quiet and paid his bill. It was just part of the job. Then the dream started. Vivid, suffocating dreams where I was trapped in the diner. But it was endless, a labyrinth of empty booths and silent coffee machines. And the Traveler was there, sitting in his booth, but in the dream, he would look at me. His eyes were solid black. He would open his mouth, and instead of words, a cold, thick shadow would pour out, filling the diner, choking me. I wake up gasping, my alarm clock showing 4:03 a.m. The incidents escalated. One night, I was refilling his coffee. As I poured, my hand trembled. I spilled a few drops on the Formica table. I apologized, grabbing a cloth. When I looked up, his hand was resting on the table. His fingers were long, too long, and his nails were dark and thick like old chitin. He wasn't looking at me, but his head was tilted, as if listening to a frequency I couldn't hear. I backed away quickly. Another night, Ben the trucker was getting loud and belligerent, complaining about his order. As I tried to calm him down, I saw the Traveler, still in his booth, slowly turn his head towards Ben. He didn't say anything. He just stared. Ben stopped mid-sentence. His face went slack, then pale with a terror I'd never seen before. He threw a 20 on the counter, mumbled, "Sorry, Maya," and practically ran out of the diner. He never came back. The final straw was Mrs. Gable. She came in as usual at 3 a.m., but she seemed nervous. She sat at the counter instead of her usual booth. "Maya, dear," she whispered, her voice trembling. "That man in the corner. Who is he?" "I don't know, Mrs. Gable. He's just a regular." She shook her head, her eyes wide. "No, child. I saw him outside my window last night, just standing there in the dark, looking up. But I live on the 12th floor." My blood went cold. At that moment, the bell on the diner door jingled. The Traveler was leaving. It was only 3:30 a.m. He never left early. He walked past us, and for the first time, he stopped. He turned his head and looked directly at Mrs. Gable. He didn't have black eyes like in my dream. They were a pale, watery blue, but they were utterly, terrifyingly empty. He gave a slow, deliberate smile that didn't touch his eyes and walked out. Mrs. Gable had a heart attack right there at the counter. The paramedics said it was her age, the stress. But I knew. I quit that night. I drove past the Crossroads Grill a year later. It was boarded up, out of business. A new highway had diverted traffic away. But on a whim, I peeked through a crack in the boards. The diner was empty, covered in dust. Except for one thing. In the far corner, in that same red vinyl booth, sat a tall, gaunt figure. He was staring right at the window. Right at me. I didn't wait to see if he smiled. I just ran. Some places aren't just stops on a road. They're junctions. And some of the things that stop there aren't just passing through. Story 4. The Last Watchman of the Granite Point Lighthouse. My name is Elias. For 10 years, I was the sole keeper of the Granite Point Lighthouse, a solitary sentinel on a jagged, windswept island off the coast of Maine. The Coast Guard had automated the light decades ago, but they kept a watchman on the payroll, more for tradition and maintenance than necessity. It was a life of isolation, and I cherished it. Or I did, until the last season. The problem began with the fog. It was an unseasonably thick, persistent fog that rolled in and refused to leave for weeks. It was a living thing, damp and cold, muting the world to a palette of grays. It swallowed the sound of the crashing waves below, leaving an eerie, suffocating silence. The automated foghorn would blast its mournful note every 30 seconds, a sound that became the pounding heartbeat of my loneliness. One night, during the thickest of it, I saw a light out at sea. It was a faint, bobbing lantern light, far too close to the rocks. A boat in trouble. I grabbed my marine radio. Unidentified vessel near Granite Point. This is the lighthouse keeper. You're in dangerous waters. Please respond. Static. I tried again. Nothing. I rushed to the giant windows of the watch room, peering into the murk. The light was gone. The next night, it happened again. The lantern light, closer this time. And this time, I heard something else. Faint, carried on the wet air, was the sound of singing. A woman's voice, beautiful and sad. A wordless melody that seemed to pull at my very soul. It was a siren song. I knew the old stories, of course. Every sailor does. But hearing it, it was hypnotic. I felt an irresistible urge to go outside, to find the source of that beautiful sorrow that I fought it. I locked the door to the lighthouse and stayed up all night, the foghorn my only anchor to reality. The following evening, the light appeared again, so close I thought it must be on the island itself. The singing was clearer now. I could almost make out words. They were a promise of an end to loneliness, of a warmth that would drive away the chill forever that I couldn't resist. I took my heavy storm lantern and stepped out into the fog. It was like stepping into a cold, wet blanket. The world ended 5 feet in front of me. Hello, I called out, my voice swallowed by the gloom. The singing stopped. In the silence, I heard a new sound, a soft, wet, dragging noise like something heavy being pulled across the rocks. Sh-thump, sh-thump. Who's there? I shouted, my voice trembling. The dragging sound came faster. I swung my lantern around, but the light barely penetrated the fog. The sound was all around me now. Sh-thump, sh-thump, sh-thump. And then I saw it. A shape emerged from a mist. It was the form of a woman, but impossibly tall and slender. Her skin was the color of bleached coral, and her hair was long, dark, and tangled with seaweed. She was beautiful, but her eyes were solid black orbs, deep as the ocean trench. And from the waist down, there were no legs. Instead, a thick, powerful, coiling tail like that of a giant eel or a lamprey dragged behind her, making that terrible, wet sound on the granite. She opened her mouth, and the beautiful song resumed, but this time it was a screech, a cacophony of drowning voices and tearing metal. I dropped my lantern and ran, blind with terror, back towards the lighthouse. I could hear the shh thump right behind me, smell the reek of salt and decay. I slammed the heavy oak door shut and bolted it, collapsing against it, sobbing. A heavy weight thudded against the other side of the door. Then silence. For a long time, there was nothing but the foghorn. Then a whisper slithered through the keyhole, a voice like water filling lungs. The light will not always burn, keeper. The fog comes for everyone. I will be waiting. I was relieved by the supply boat a week later. I never went back. I gave no explanation, just resigned. They found a new keeper, a young man eager for the solitude. He lasted 6 months. The official report said he fell from the cliffs during a storm. But I read the coroner's report, leaked to me by an old friend. His body was found tangled in the rocks below. The strange part, the report noted, was that his lungs were filled with salt water, as if he had drowned, long before he hit the rocks. And clutched in his hand was a piece of strange, iridescent seaweed that no botanist could identify. The fog, it seems, always collects its due, and so we leave the world of the night shift. The empty hospital ward, the static-filled security office, the lonely diner, the isolated lighthouse. These are the places where reality wears thin, where the things that watch from the darkness sometimes decide to make their presence known. The next time you're safe in your bed, listening to the hum of the night, remember those who keep watch. And be grateful for the light, because the night belongs to something else. Sleep well.